Hello, children. How are you today? Fine? Okay. Today we are going to read an orange book. Yes? The title of the book is Mr. Merton's Holiday. I'm going to read these words, repeat them. Mr., Mrs., bust, bipped, bounced, through, grumpy, shadow. Okay? Now Mercedes is going to read. Follow the reading. Mr. Merton liked things to be on time. He used his watch to keep his family on time. He liked beds made at 6 o'clock. He liked breakfast by 8. He liked dishes done by 9. In Mr. Merton's house, the clocks buzzed and rang and beeped. "No more clocks," said Mrs. Merton. "We are all going on holiday, and we are not taking a clock or a watch with us." That night, Mrs. Merton packed her bag. Beach ball, sunglasses, sunscreen, sun umbrella, magazines, books, lemonade, floatboard. Then she unpacked Mr. Merton's bag. She took out the clocks and the watches. "This is going to be a good holiday," she said. Mr. Merton did not like the beach. Sun umbrellas were out of line. Beach balls bounced out of time. "I'll show everyone how to have a holiday," he said. "This tent will be put up in 5 minutes. Get going." But when Mr. Merton went to get his watches, they were not in his bag. He looked through everything. There were no watches. There were no clocks. "Who has taken my watches?" he said. "Who has taken my clocks?" But no one heard. Mrs. Merton and the children were swimming. Mr. Merton sat under a tree. He was grumpy. "What is the time?" he asked people. But no one was wearing a watch. Then he saw the shadow of his tree. The shadow was moving across the sand. Mr. Merton had an idea. After lunch, he wrote dishes on the shadow. When he felt tired, he wrote sleep on the shadow. When the shadow was long and thin, he wrote dinner on the shadow. Mr. Merton's shadow clock worked well, and so did his family. Mrs. Merton cooked breakfast by 8 o'clock. The children did the dishes by 9. "Our holiday is over," they wailed. But out to sea, something was happening. Out to sea, a large wave was rushing to the shore. Sun umbrellas were packed up and picnic baskets were packed away. But Mr. Merton stayed where he was. "Keep off my shadow clock," he shouted at the sea. "Keep off." But the wave swished, swashed onto the beach and over the shadow clock. It went over Mr. Merton and sent him bobbling like a cork out to sea. It sent him splashing and swimming. It sent him leaping and laughing. "What fun!" he said, and he dived over the waves. "What fun it is to swim! Come in the water," he shouted. Look, now he's enjoying the water. Mr. Merton swam and swam. He ate an ice cream for his lunch and swam all afternoon. He was so tired at night he forgot to eat his dinner. At the end of the week, Mrs. Merton packed up the tent. "We must go home," she said. "But I don't want to go home," wailed Mr. Merton. "I like the beach. I'm having a good time. I'm having a wonderful time." "Good," said Mrs. Merton, and she smiled. "Holiday time is the best time of all." Look at Mr. Merton. He wants to stay.